How to complete the square? No. How to solve for x by completing the square. So we've just worked on how to complete the square just now, and we now have an expression that has a variable over there. So that kind of does complicate things a little bit. So in terms of you solving for x by completing the square in this expression, yeah, it's not super duper complicated. This in an exam is a 5-mark question, so this is what we're working on in this tutorial. Hi guys, Levi here from Bright Young Brains. So if you're wondering what Bright Young Brains does, well, we basically mainly create online courses, math for learners in high school. So the link to that is in the description if you want to check out our online course platform. But anyway, since you're here, what are we doing? Completing the square. Okay, so solving for x by completing the square. Firstly, if you are not familiar with completing the square, there's a link in the description to a tutorial on how to complete the square in general, because here obviously if we have a variable there where b is, it kind of does make things look a bit complicated if you don't know how to complete the square with just numbers. So we said that in terms of completing the square, right, our coefficient of x squared always has to be a 1. Now fortunately here our coefficient of x squared is already a 1, so that's like one thing sorted. The next thing we said was that our expression always has to be in standard form. Now likely our expression is already in standard form. A is 1, b is the negative p here, c is a negative 4 over there. So obviously in a situation like this, they're asking us to complete the square, and then you may be thinking, but what about the p? Doesn't the p like complicate things? Well, clearly it low-key does, but not too much. So the first thing we said is, in terms of completing the square, coefficient has to be 1, this has to be in standard form, and then once all those boxes are checked, we now need to get a value for b over 2 squared, because this value here in our expression, we're going to add it and then we're going to subtract it afterwards, you see, so that we just change the way our expression looks without necessarily changing the format of our expression. So we know that when you have completed the square, your expression will be in a format that looks like this. Don't mind the m, you see it's just a variable. I'm using an m in this case because you see there's a p somewhere in our question. So in terms of completing the square, our expression just needs to end up in that format. So we said we need to get what this value is, of which we can see that our value for b over 2 squared there is just this expression there. Now try not to square inside there, because leaving it like this makes your life so much easier, and you'll see why just now. So what we need to do here is right next to where b is, you see right next to where the bx will be, which is this thing here, right next to that, you want to add this first. Always add first, so you're going to add this first and then subtract it. There you are go. So, or there you go rather. So this we said try not to simplify that, or rather just don't simplify it at all. These three here, as we have already mentioned, these three here, we're going to compress them into this bracket over here squared, and then these two are just going to form our value for q over there. So doing that, this and that, we already said all these three here, by default you will always compress them into like one bracket, where this value here and that value there will be there, and then the whole thing squared. You see, you would have factorized. And again, if this is looking funny, then you basically do need to go through the tutorial which we just went through on how to complete the square. So here, these three, we said they will just end up as that, and then these, now you can simplify this. All these two terms here, now you can simplify this. Now simplifying this, in your brackets, this is what you're going to have, because negative p squared is just a p squared, 2 squared is just a 4. Now in terms of you simplifying, this is as far as you can go. Now obviously if you want to have these under the same denominator, then you'd need to multiply this by 4 over 4. There you go. This is as far as you can go in terms of completing the square. So we have completed the square now. So obviously if they're asking us to solve for x by completing the square, you complete the square first and then now you can solve for x. Solving for x here, clearly we need to make x the subject of the formula. So the first thing we clearly need to do is to take this whole thing to the other side. Now taking that whole thing to the other side, just remember that this is what you're going to have over there. You see, remember these two, they're not in brackets, so you don't have to like multiply the negative or anything like that. You see, this head it's negative, this head it's negative, and then they just now have the same denominator, so don't get confused over there. Now in terms of solving for x here, clearly we need to square root both sides, and then this is what you have. And if you can recall from what we mentioned, this here, you always need to have your plus or minus over there, especially if you are solving for x by completing the square. So in terms of solving for x here, this will just go over, and then for a situation like this one, you may want to leave your answer like this, you see, because this is already accommodating two answers, one where this is a positive and one where this is a negative. So in a scenario where this is not specifically a value and they want you to solve for x by completing the square, nothing changes. Just use your normal ways of completing the square. And we said coefficient has to be a positive 1, this has to be in standard form, and then you have to get a value for b over 2 squared, but don't square it or simplify it, just keep it the way it is, because what you want actually is the value inside there, because that value inside there you can already see. That's what we used here to eventually just factorize these three. And then these we simplified, and then we just simplified, and then yeah. So obviously for more tutorials like these, don't forget to subscribe. And as mentioned already, on the course platform there is specifically an algebra course that goes deep into how to solve for x, simplifying and stuff like that. I believe it's one of the best courses on the platform, so if you want to check that out, the link is in the description. And for more tutorials on this channel, there are playlists over here for you to check out, so I will catch you over there.